Dear participants, welcome to the Community of Democracies Youth Forum. I am Daria Onushko, Program Officer on Gender Equality and Youth at the Permanent Secretariat of the Community of Democracies. We're so glad to be joined today by numerous youth networks, dear participants, and young leaders from across the world. The CoD Youth Forum is organized by the Permanent Secretariat of the Community of Democracies, the CoD Presidency Romania, and CoD Youth Leads, who are champions of this youth forum. CoD Youth Leads are young activists and democracy leaders from different countries and regions. You can learn about them more, and we'll paste a link that you will be able to follow in the chat very soon. On this note, I'm honored to invite the Secretary General of the Community of Democracies, Thomas Garrett, for his opening remarks. Secretary General, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Daria, and to all of our participants, our speakers the next few days, our CoD Youth Leads, and representatives of youth organizations around the world. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the Community of Democracies Youth Forum. This is organized by the Permanent Secretariat of the Community of Democracies together with its youth leads. And this is being done under the leadership of the Community of Democracies Presidency, Romania. In the beginning of its presidency in 2019, Romania identified youth inclusion and empowerment as the priority it wished to make. This priority of the Romanian presidency is shared within the Community of Democracies Governing Council, which set youth empowerment as a cross-cutting theme for all work of the Community of Democracies in its strategic plan for 2018 to 2023. And just last week, on the margins of the 76th UN General Assembly, the 10th Ministerial Conference of the Community of Democracies adopted the Bucharest Ministerial Declaration. Among the many important things it talked about was, quote, the importance of the meaningful participation of youth, including young girls and young women, in democratic processes and decision-making at the national, regional, and international levels, and ensuring that youth policies and programs include the views, perspectives, and priorities of young persons in the design and shaping of such policies. I was very glad that youth leads and other youth were able to provide input into this ministerial declaration, and also that the youth leads provided a call to action at the conference that outlines their priorities. The link of this call to action will be found in our chat box during this morning's presentations. I also want to take this opportunity to announce that today, the Community of Democracies Youth Leads and the Community of Democracies officially became part of the Youth Lead platform of the U.S. Agency for International Development. This wonderful platform is designed for young change makers who are making a positive impact in their community through service, activism, advocacy, education, and entrepreneurship. We look forward to this partnership with USAID. It's been a real honor in my job as Secretary General to work with inspiring young people from different countries. For instance, our CoD Youth Leads, all of whom are actively engaged in many projects, and they're adding a very valuable voice to the dialogue on democracy. These young leaders and democracy advocates come at the moment from 24 countries around the globe, from every region. And among them are local elected officials, peace builders, activists, diplomats, and local community leaders. All of our youth leads represent a diversity of region, and they also, I will say, represent a diversity in ideology, but all work together on advancing democracy, inclusion, equality, and freedom. Looking back at the past year, together with the youth leads, we've carried out many activities and actions. We've been able to hold discussions on topics of importance to youth, such as youth participation in elections, the role of youth in Belarus' pro-democracy movement. We've also looked at such things as the impact of COVID-19 on youth activism. We implemented media campaigns to revitalize democratic principles of the Warsaw Declaration, which is the founding document of the Community of Democracies. And the youth leads took to social media to state their condemnation of attacks on young people in Afghanistan last year and in Belarus this year. So now, over the next 3 days, the Youth Forum will gather young leaders from different world regions to discuss among themselves democracy-related issues with government stakeholders. And this, we hope, will enable an authentic exchange of views on the challenges and opportunities faced by democracy worldwide. We're going to begin just this morning with the very impressive story of Ms. Sarina Faizi, who will be our keynote speaker. Democracy is fragile and must be fought for, as we're going to learn from her remarks. Participants of the forum are going to have also an opportunity to share good practices between regions regarding youth engagement and empowerment in politics and civic life. We also hope over the next 3 days to look at the role of young people in implementation of the United Nations 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda and in advancing peace and security. This will take place over 4 regional discussions. In addition to these sessions, the forum is going to have speakers from the United States Agency of International Development, from UNESCO, and from International IDEA. Youth leads will have conversations with democracy speakers from these groups who are going to share their practical advice to young people. I'm looking forward to these the next few days. To close, I want to highlight that young people play a crucial role in promoting democracy and driving democratic change. They do this both within the community of democracies, 28 member states, as well as at the United Nations. They also do this in their countries, in their cities, in their towns. Young people now are not the future, but they're acknowledged as the current generation of policymakers, and they're recognized as effective agents of change in democratic systems. And to young people, I just want to say, you have the numbers. There are more young people on earth than at any time in the world's history. And you can ensure success for the 2030 agenda. And with it, you can guarantee for your future global sustainability and stability. All those challenges which have plagued generations before you, unemployment, poverty, gender inequality, a lack of access to quality education, and seemingly never-ending conflict, I truly believe are going to find an answer in young people's ideas, and more importantly, in young people's action. We look forward to this forum as just a beginning to hearing your ideas in the days and months ahead. And so I want to thank you for your participation, and I look forward to hearing your ideas and your thoughts as we move forward. I now turn the program back over to Daria Onescu. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Secretary General, for your remarks and also welcoming the participants. Now I would like to introduce our keynote speaker, Sarina Faizi. Born and raised in Afghanistan, Sarina was elected to the Kandahar City Council when she was only 17. During her term, she advocated for human rights, women's empowerment, and free elections. Currently, Sarina is in the United States, and she recently graduated from William and Mary Law School with a master's in law. Sarina is a recipient of several fellowships and awards. For example, she was selected to become a Bush Fellow, where 17 women from the MENA region in Afghanistan had a year of leadership training. Also, she was a State Department international visitor participant. Dear Sarina, we're really delighted to have you with us today. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Argeta, for having me here. And that's a really amazing platform, and hearing from you all has made me more amazed, and to know that, yeah, there is organization and people who watch and look forward for what a young generation do and kind of represent us and give us a chance to represent our country and ourselves and our future of the country here in international platform. I would like to start up with some of the key points, being as Afghan woman and what is happening in Afghanistan, which is really related to the future of Afghanistan and to the subject kind of. It is really tricky to say that democracy in Afghanistan right now, because we worked so hard, not just Afghan people, but entire international community in Afghanistan to do the investment for the democracy that we are talking right now, for the future, for the youths to be a future. for Afghanistan. And right now we see that youth people and the future of Afghanistan is escaping from Afghanistan because of what is happening there. So we can see, if we don't have the good leader and a good policy makers and not having a good support from international community, no matter how democratic you are, you're not going to get to where you should be. And for the young generation, it's really important. I want to start out with my story a little bit. I was a young kid when I was just 10 when I lost my mom. My mom was a doctor. And then I had, as Afghan woman, of course, in the Asia, most likely in Afghanistan, in Muslim countries, you are responsible if you are educated and you are allowed to get education as a female, you are responsible for your whole family to pay them back as, working and survive, serving for them for the rest of your life, I would say, or maybe until they are stabilized. So I also worked there and I supported my sister, my family, my brothers, and of course, my family. Slowly with the time, I realized that there is a need of a change and we have to have the young generation in a part of this, not just like in some workshops or programs or organization. We need them in the politics too, to have a good platform for them there too. So I elect myself for provincial council back in Kandahar, Afghanistan in really early age. And I honestly speaking, I had a big support of a lot of youths too there because they really were looking for a new change. Tom mentioned, the youths are change and they're the future. Of course, we always try to make the changes as much as possibility we see and we could. And I went there with a big, hope and a dream of like making a change for the future as Afghan woman. But seeing the situation there and being a woman there in the really early age, you may have the power of a change and you may hold the chair, the key chair, but you wouldn't be able to make the changes because you're just alone and one person cannot do anything. You have to have the people, the same mindset that who can work as a team. It is coming back to a teamwork. But we were able to do a lot regarding the scholarship, regarding the future. And my main focus was on the young generation, especially on kids and women there in Afghanistan. And we worked so close with them. And now I see a good example I can give you that most likely, people that I work with them back in Afghanistan are right now in India, in Tajikistan, in Turkmenistan, in Turkey for their education, which is really, really good thing. And right now they're holding the same as degree as I have the master degree from that countries, which is opening a good way because today or tomorrow, those all youths and those all, good skill, like the people who have skills from different countries, they're going to go back to Afghanistan, which is going to be the future and policy makers of Afghanistan and the leaders, I would call. The same goes to anyone who are out right now. I work personally really close with the youth and I kind of, relate to the youth because I believe that I'm still youth. And the last message that I will have regarding my story, that life will always try to put you down and there will be people to put you down. No matter what you do and how strong you pretend that you are or you are seriously inside. But, sometime, we will feel like, no, we are not enough, but we are at the end of the day. So never give up as a youth. Never, ever give up. Just keep moving on and you will get to the point where you are. Always set your goal really up. No matter maybe you will not get to that point, but at least you're going to get so close to that point. That's my last message for all those that are watching me. And thank you so much for having me here again. Daria, the floor is back to you.
Thank you very much, Sarina, for your inspirational story. And thank you, Secretary General, for joining for this opening segment. Right now, as we had a small change in the program, we will take a small break and we will be right back with you at 8:45 a.m. Eastern Time and 3:45 p.m. Central European. We will start then with America's regional discussion, and that will really feature our youth leads from Guatemala, El Salvador, Haiti, Argentina, and the United States. They will all come together to speak about challenges to democracy in that region from youth perspectives. Well, thank you for joining us today. We will be back just in a moment.
Hello, Gina. Hello, how are you?
Hello, Wilbert. Well, I think that it is time to start our Americas regional discussion on challenges to democracy from a youth perspective. And we have with us today youth leads from Salvador, Guatemala, United States, Argentina, and Haiti. And especially thanks to the Latin American and Caribbean Network for Democracy for partnering with us for this session. Let me now briefly introduce our wonderful moderator, Gina Romero. Gina is a co-founder and executive director of the Latin American and Caribbean Network for Democracy, or REDLAD. She also serves as independent consultant for international and local organizations working on civic participation, political affairs, and youth and gender issues. We will post very soon her full biography in the chat. But for now, Gina, please, you have the floor.
Hello, everyone. I don't know if you can listen to me. Is it okay? The sound, the volume? Okay. So hello, everyone. Thank you to the Community of Democracies for this invitation. And thanks for the fantastic youth that are here with us. And I also thanks for your introduction. I welcome you to the panel Challenges to Democracy in Americas from the Youth Perspective. In this panel, we will be listening to different youth people from different countries in Latin America about the challenges to democracy in their countries from their youth perspective. These youth representatives will share their work, their efforts towards advancing, restoring democracy, freedom, the opportunities and prosperities from the view that they have on what is happening in their countries. This session wants to inspire other youth or other people who could be listening, and we also want to raise awareness about the importance of youth activism in society. So I will welcome all the fantastic panelists and commentators that we have today. The idea is that first, after the introductions, I'm going to post a couple of questions for the two presenters to work on. We had one person from Cuba, but unfortunately, at the last moment, he couldn't be here with us, which is very sad because the Cuban experience is very important. But after these couple of rounds of questions, we are going to have three other youth to comment and to give some brief comments about what I have been talking in the first part. So let me start to introduce our two first presentators. First, I want to introduce you to Lu Argeta. She's from El Salvador. She founded a new political party that is called Nuestro Tiempo, or Our Time. She's a member of the Global Shapers community and the executive secretary of the Latin American Youth Network for Democracy, Juventud LAC. She has a bachelor degree in international relations and specializations in Middle Eastern politics and international law and organizations. So Lu, welcome to the panel. And also as a speaker, we have a Walter Corso. He is from Guatemala, so we are going to have a view on Central America in this part of the session. He has coordinated international cooperation projects for almost 10 years in civil society, and he is currently working on the first civil society innovation lab of Guatemala, which is very interesting. He has a bachelor degree in international relations and a master's in public management and leadership. So welcome, Walter, also to this conversation. So the first question, or the first part of the dialogue that I want you guys to dig in and then to chat, it is related in the activism or the engagement that you have in politics or in civil society in your countries. So from this perspective, from this action that is rather different, right? Lu from more the political sector and Walter in this innovation lab. what are your opinion on the main challenges to democracy in your countries, and also how you yourselves and maybe your groups are trying to address them? So you have 5 or 7 minutes to answer each. So Lu, if you want to start.
Yes, of course, absolutely. And thank you, Gina, for the introductions, and thank you to the Community of Democracies. I'm very happy to be here. I think the question that you're asking, Gina, is very important, simply because we are in the midst of a global pandemic. And I think we've all heard at one point or another the hypotheses of how the pandemic has heightened authoritarianism in many countries. And I believe that in my country, in El Salvador, this could very well much be a rule to this idea. So in El Salvador, we've had, in the last couple of years, we've had 2 elections, 2 or 3 years, we've had 2 elections, a presidential election, and then an election for our parliament representatives. And these elections have proven to be very historic in the sense that bipartisanship in El Salvador that had been very strong for almost 30 years, that was broken. And we now have a new president from a new political party. But unfortunately, a lot of people thought and were deeply believed that this president was gonna do things differently, and was gonna rule with a lot of innovation. He's a very, relatively speaking, he's a very young president. And so a lot of people thought he was going to bring a lot of innovation. He's very into ruling through social media, and a lot of the things that he does it through social media. And that was kind of the hype back then, right? To have this new person from a new political party who was going to bring new change, who was going to do things differently. Unfortunately, we slowly began to realize that his MO of doing things were not completely different, but exactly the same as we had seen, other governments do things in El Salvador in previous years. But it's not only that, we've also, El Salvador has turned into a country that in the last 30 years has gone through a very violent civil war to establishing very successful peace accords in 1992, and then trying to rebuild a democracy from that. And building democracy, establishing democracy is like the easy thing. Trying to maintain democracy is the challenging thing. And when the pandemic came, that basically gave the president a lot of justification to do things where he didn't necessarily think he had to be transparent, with the people, that like the pandemic just would be enough to justify his actions towards doing that. One of the main things that has happened in El Salvador is he, once he was elected, then we had our second wave of elections where the majority of these elections were for the elections actually that we had this year, what pertained to choosing our new parliament representatives. And what we saw happen there was that the majority of the people that got elected were, representatives that supported him and are from his political party. And to everyone's surprise, on the first day that they decided to, on the first day that they had to, work as representatives, that was the first day that they established a self-inflicted coup, as many people from the opposition would like to call. And they basically took out or fired the court supreme, the constitutional court, which is our highest court within our judicial system, and they established new magistrates for that, that were obviously magistrates or judges that are, you know, catering to the president. So in El Salvador, we now live in a country that without independence in you know, our executive, legislative, and judicial powers, all these powers are catering towards the president, and what the president says and what the president does, that's how it you know, how it goes, basically. And so we're living in a time where there are basically no constitutional guarantees for the protection of the integrity and the dignity of a person in El Salvador. We saw our very first case of a political prisoner. It was only for a few hours, but nevertheless, a political prisoner that we saw a couple of weeks ago. And they're still, right now, we're in the process, you know, they're in the process of trying to undermine transparency and trying to undermine judicial independence. So that, to me, is one of the biggest challenges that we are going through right now. And it makes it really, really hard in the sense of, like, you know, what can you do as a person who knows that this is not the way the system is supposed to work? This is not the way how democracy works. And what are the things that you can do considering the very real risks that exist? And I think that these are, I remember like talking to Daria and with all my colleagues a few days previous to this forum, but I was telling them how sometimes there is a very real risk, but I think it's very important to actually take spaces like this and to take advantage of spaces like this and to make sure that the people hear what you have to say, and especially the international community, because everybody here in El Salvador knows what's happening, but what's actually really important is to let people know outside of El Salvador what is happening as well. So I think that is very important, to take advantage of those things and meet with people from whatever, you know, corner in the world you can, to actually let people know, you know, and what is going on. And I think El Salvador is maybe one of the many countries that's going through something like this. I know in Latin America, we have cases like Bolivia, for example. Obviously Venezuela, Gina, you mentioned Cuba earlier. Obviously countries like this, Nicaragua, who have also, you know, are very in critical conditions, but are also, you know, undermining, the governments there are undermining democracy, are undermining the freedoms and the liberties of everyday citizens. And those are things that are not supposed to happen. So I think I will leave it at that. And yeah, I'll leave it to Walter to continue.
Hello?
Yes, Gina, we can hear you now.
I'm sorry, somehow I lost the connection, but you mentioned very interesting things too. Before giving the floor to Walter, that I think that is already in the call, I wanted to do just a quick follow-up and maybe Walter can take from that also after your response. And it is, well, it is very interesting what you mentioned, and maybe that is why some of us are still questioning if El Salvador lives under a democracy, and therefore it is still worth being in the community of democracies, right? But then you mentioned something very interesting in terms of politics, and it is that this president that the El Salvador has now, it has this Jewish image it has this Jewish language. He uses social media, as you mentioned. He is the one who is trying to build up all the economy from this cryptocurrency. So there is a lot of language and a lot of actions that led you think that maybe this is actually a government led by a youth mind. But then what you are saying is that that is not really true, that youth is not always a synonym of innovation, for example, or change, or so I really would like to know what it is then, what could be, from your view and also from the work that you have in political parties, what could be at the end a government from a youth perspective? What could that mean? Also with the face of what is happening now in El Salvador.
Yeah, I think you're definitely right. I think the president right now has very innovative and very young, new ideas. That's actually the name of his political party, New Ideas. But I don't think they're ideas that are directed towards benefiting the majority of the population. And I think that is the biggest deal. For example, we have become, on September 7th, we became as you said, Gina, the first country in the world to accept Bitcoin as a legal tender. But they did this in a country where over 70% of the population don't even have a regular bank account. So how are you supposed to convince people to actually use Bitcoin when we're not even alphabetized correctly or adequately in, how to use or how to have our very own bank account? So it's ideas and it's decision making that's very far-fetched from reality. And so as youth, we need to learn how this is affecting us. Because the other thing about how El Salvador is being governed right now, it's very complex because it's not only authoritarianism, it's also very strong populism. And up to this day, the majority of the people still accept and still support the current president. And the issue here is that not many people are aware what democracy entails, what democracy is about, why it is important to have a separation of powers, why it is important to, have a republic, why it is important that we keep our fundamental liberties and freedom, why it is important that, the president does, decision making and takes actions with transparency, with accountability, and none of that is happening. So I believe one of the key elements that we are missing in El Salvador, in our population and within our youth, is the fact that we don't understand these concepts and that we don't know what's the best way to govern our country and how we can benefit as a people and as young people, how democracy can benefit us and how democracy is one of the best answers, although it is a very imperfect form of government. It is the best type of government that ensures that we have liberties, that our rights are being kept safe, that our voices are being heard. And then we can do things like, for example, go out and march in the streets and manifest towards something that we don't like or that we don't agree on. For the first time, and I'm going to close with this, for the first time on September 15th, it was our Independence Day. And for the first time in my lifetime, I saw the biggest manifestation that I had seen ever in my life. Just don't have this. We don't have this to go out and protest. But for the first time, and I actually joined that protest as well, for the first time in my life in 30 years, since establishing our peace accords and since coming out of this civil war, we actually saw a manifestation of over 20,000 people which is a big deal. And then on that day and the days after, the government was making different threats and trying to post this manifestation as something that was illegal, when it is known, or it should be known throughout the entire world, that people should have the right to express themselves and, you know, raise their voices when something is going on that they don't agree with. So as youth, we actually need to take advantage of all these opportunities. And we need to join, we need to organize ourselves, because I think that's also another thing that's missing. And that could be very key to, you know, resisting a little and to create a front towards, you know, authoritarian regimes or authoritarian leaders. And you need to try to organize yourself and see how you can, you know, how you can resist towards these things that are happening in your country or in countries around the world.
Thank you, Lou. That was fantastic to listen about that. And just to close and giving the floor to Walter, I think that for me also it was a huge surprise, all this mobilization and all that the collective power started to bring from to the streets. And I think that actually show us that every crisis fosters opportunities for the citizen power, right? So that is also how we build changes. So thank you, Lou. And then in the next round, I can post you also some question on what it means to be a woman in this world of politics that is very much taken by men, right? So Walter, I'm glad you finally could join us. We are talking about the main challenges that democracy has in your country, in Guatemala, and how are you trying to address them? As I previously mentioned, you lead an innovation lab, so that is really interesting. So just connecting with what we talked with Lou in regards to what it means to have innovation in politics and innovation for fostering change. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Gina. And I'm very sorry for being late. I had connection issues. I guess this is part of these virtual events now. But thank you to the Secretary General of the Community of Democracies and everyone making this event possible for inviting me to participate in this conversation. I'm very proud, and it's a great honor being part of this Youth Lead initiative and share these kind of platforms along with Lou and Brian and everyone in this conversation. I'm always learning and very, very interested in what everybody's doing. After what Lou said, I have to share that I'm very concerned about the state of democracy and all the challenges that we are seeing now, not only in my country, Guatemala, but more widely in Central America. As you heard Lou talking about El Salvador. I think that many of you may be aware already that we had different challenges, like high levels of poverty, high rates of violence and unemployment, corruption at all levels. And now, more recently, my generation is seeing our democracies in great danger. In my country, previous generations were repressed and were killed. But when I was born, we were about to sign in 1996 a peace deal that ended 36 years of a civil war. So let's say that I have always been able of criticizing the government, or if I wanted to participate in politics without fear of being killed or being disappeared, right? A very different situation from the previous generations that live in my country. But now we are seeing how different groups in my country may be taking us to a future where we would not have a free press, a diverse and vibrant civil society, and political parties that really represent the interest of the people. We have seen, at least in Guatemala, how everything is aligned to weaken our justice system. We have been seeing how our human rights activists being criminalized. And now, just recently, our government and our Congress approved a new law that will fiscalize NGOs, and that is with the main purpose of criminalize everyone that is opposing the government actions. And this is something that we have seen before, and we have seen the effect that has in their democracies. And this is something that we have to worry a lot. As Lou said, we have to speak up for the democracy, for its values. And let's say that it's very difficult to talk about what am I doing to address this. But as you mentioned, I work for an innovation lab that focus on doing research on public policies in Guatemala, and we do some kind of research work in El Salvador and Honduras. And it's very worrying what we are seeing and the effects that this has in the other challenges that we had before. So I try my best as executive director of this research lab, that our research agenda shows paths to different stakeholders that can lead us to strengthen and fight for our democracies. But this has to be a collective effort, definitely. We cannot do it alone, and we cannot do it only in our countries. We have to look for allies in other countries that are living pretty much the same, because this is something that it's becoming a trend, right?
Right, Walter, thank you. It is also very worrying that just to see these two countries with these huge democracy gaps, that is something very, very common for Latin America. I think that we all have these difficulties with imperfect democracies, but also we as a continent are also in a path for this institutionalization of democracy, but also for challenging the civic space from civil society, which is actually the basis for civil society to exist, right? And as you mentioned, Walter, these basics for civil society are freedom of expression, freedom of association, and freedom of public manifestation. So access to resources, and I think that has been threatened highly in the whole region. Just to go from that last idea that you posted, what do you think that it could be the role of the community of democracies in that, actually, that you mentioned, of the importance of gathering different actions from the international field to actually help what is happening in Guatemala. Guatemala, for the people who listen to us and don't know, Guatemala has had a constant crisis for the last years, especially due to corruption and the reaction that the people has had on corruption, which is something kind of similar to what have been happening in Peru, but we are not talking about Peru. So what do you think, Walter? Just a small thought on that, and that you mentioned the collective action and international also feel. What could be the role of the community of democracies? And then we both, with you and Lou, we are going to pass to the second question.
Thank you, Gina. One important role that the community of democracies, already has, but let's say we can put it on perspective under this specific subject, is to promote an agenda in Central America pro-democracy. We are seeing this happening in Guatemala, in El Salvador. Pretty much everyone knows what is happening in Nicaragua, right? So we are seeing the whole concept of democracy being threatened in the region. And we know, as Lou said, that many people in our country support actually that this kind of authoritarianism. And they support it because everyone is suffering so many problems that maybe they see this kind of figures, right, as a way to maybe solve their problems. But definitely the platform that Community of Democracies has to promote the values of democracy in the region, in this specific region, and how we can interconnect not only youth leaders, but how we cross our work, how we share the space with decision makers at high levels of decision power, decision making, how we connect with international organizations, with other civil society leaders, with the press, mainly with the press. That is something that it can be done. And I believe that this kind of pressure can really help, at least to send a big message that a lot of actors and stakeholders are willing to do something about it and to speak about it, because that's something that we have to say, we have to do. We have to speak up for democracy, definitely.
Great, Walter, thank you. So please, for both of you, going more in a personal maybe view, how did you both become engaged in politics or in civil society or in whatever you are doing now? How did then your story of democracy start, and going, just analyzing or seeing your history? What will be your advice for young people in different parts of the world with your experiences? What advice would you give them if they want to start a path related to the work on democracy? So if you want, Walter, you can start, and then Lou can follow.
Thank you, Gina. Well, I started working in civil society because of my mom. When she was 10 years old, my grandfather actually was killed in front of my grandmother and in front of my little aunt. And I saw my whole life growing up how violence changed my mother's life forever. So I grew up with this social inclination, let's say, and I started getting involved in different initiatives when I was very young, but it became very personal when I started working in a youth violence prevention organization as project coordinator, because everything made sense. It was something very personal. This class gave me the opportunity to work with vulnerable youth in different high levels of violence. I work with communities with high levels of violence during a lot of years, and I work very close to youth in those communities to promote their civic participation, to give them new skills and tools to have a positive impact on their communities. And I had the chance to work with different stakeholders to promote programs and policies focused on violence prevention. So I definitely can say that I became engaged on civil society, but specifically on the subject of violence, because it is a personal cause, because I don't want to see more families suffering the pain that violence brings to their lives and how it's changed forever after some father or any of the parents or any relative or friend dies because of this problem. And now, let's say the advice that I can give to this generation that wants to participate on this is that we have never seen a generation with all the information and all the tools that this generation has. We are seeing, or at least my generation didn't have it. I had internet when I was young, but I had not all the access that this generation has. And this generation has to take advantage of it. You have all the information, you have infinite possibilities to meet people around the world, to connect, to make networks, and you have to take advantage of that. You have to use it in favor of the causes that you may have. In my case, it was violence, but you have to find the cause and take advantage of everything that you have to use it for the good.
Perfect, Walter. Thank you. Lu?
Thank you. Yeah. Unfortunately, the story that Walter tells of, the killing of a family member is unfortunately not uncommon in our country, especially in the Northern Triangle, where we had different sorts of conflicts and civil wars. And I know a lot of people that, that lost a parent or a brother or an aunt or an uncle during the Civil War here as well. In my case, I was actually a refugee for quite some time, which I didn't, realize until later on in life, because my parents were forced to send their 3 daughters to another country while the last offensive here during the Civil War happened. And so, these are very hard decisions that families had to be forced to take, in order to keep their relatives and families safe and sound. And so the way that I got involved in politics is a little bit different. I actually had the privilege to study abroad. And then when I actually came back to El Salvador and I started working with different NGOs and I started traveling within El Salvador, that basically opened my eyes to the reality that people lived in El Salvador, and especially for women. And so that really motivated me, although I always liked the political and the international scene. That basically just really motivated me to take the next step and to actually start working within civil society. And that's how I started. That I got my start within civil society and different organizations, like the one that I'm working with now, which is the democracy, the Latin American Youth Network for Democracy, and that basically opened another set of doors, and then another set of doors, and then another set of doors. And I actually, someone came to me with the idea of building or creating a political party. And I gave it a thought for a moment, and then I said yes. And obviously got a lot of backlash for that, because we know not just in Central America, not just in Latin America, but in the whole world probably, politics usually is a synonym of really terrible things. And why would anyone in their, mind would want to associate or would want to make a career in politics? Because it is associated with corruption and stealing and bad governance and blah, blah, blah. And so, but I had a very idealistic view of these things, right? And I thought, I just want to try it out. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. And so I basically took the leap. I founded the most recent political party in El Salvador. It's called Nuestro Tiempo, Our Time. And it is a political party that started with mostly young people. And I think the special thing about that is the enthusiasm that comes with it, the innovation that comes with it, that we try to keep a lot of energy, good energy going through all the things that we do. But we also knew that we needed to surround ourselves with people with more experience, with the older generation. And I think that's very important. And if I'm here, giving advice to other people and other youth, I think that's basically one of the things that I would say is it's very important that you surround yourself with good people and people that support you, but also people with experience and people who have dabbled and worked in the political scene one way or another, because you're going to need that support. You're going to need that expertise from them. If you can get a mentorship out of that, that's even better. That's something that I hugely recommend. And then the other thing is you need to stick to your values and principles. And that is because in a world of politics, you don't join politics to be famous. You don't join politics to make friends. You don't join politics to, you do it to try and change your country and the world, but it's not an easy thing to do. You do it to serve, basically, and to try to, have a little bit of say in how things are being done and how you can actually change lives of people in the best way possible. It's easier said than done, but sticking to your principles, to your values, to the things that you actually believe in, that is what's going to keep you safe and grounded for most of your career in politics. And the one reason that I'm emphasizing this is because a lot of the representatives that we now have in our parliament, a lot of them are youth. Our youth quota is significant now in terms of parliament representatives. Unfortunately, it's youth that are, again, catering to the needs and wants of an authoritarian president. And that is something that is completely unacceptable. Because again, you're there to serve the country and the people, and it's not a self-serving type of job. So that would basically be my answer to that. And just to motivate people that as long as you're very clear on your reasons of why you're doing what you're doing, whether in politics or in civil society, I think that is your conviction to keep doing those things that will hopefully make a change for the better.
Thank you, Lou, and thank you, Walter. It is very interesting to see how we all have in the region a past of violence, the different generation. I think that each sub-region in the continent has its own time with its own generation with a lot of scars. And even me, I'm Colombian, so you can imagine how it has been to live in a country with that for a moment had the longest internal conflict in the whole world. And then also my brother was also killed. So I think that we all have these scars, but it's interesting to see how these scars of violence become strength and part of the mission that we accomplish as citizens, but also as professionals, as human beings. And just to closing this session, this part of the session, I love this description of what you talk about, Lud, of what is politics. I keep defining politics of the art of changing realities and the art of making possible the impossible. And I think that is something that everybody does in their lives, but there are some individuals and some groups that do it in a more professional and more constant way, and that is what we need to try to retake of what politics means. So thanks to Walter and Lou. Maybe we go back after to some questions that I'm seeing in the chat before closing the whole session, but now I would like to introduce our commentators. We have 3 respondents of what the dialogue we had with Lou and Walter. One of them, the first of them is Wilbert Sanford. He's for Haiti and a longtime friend. He is currently the general coordinator of Finestre, which is a civil society organization based in Haiti, and that fights against corruption and work on the involvement of youth people in public policy and democracy. And also he's the impact manager of the Global Shapers community. Also, I want to introduce Luciana Casianini from Argentina. Luciana leads the Future of Work initiative in Argentina for our NGO and provides public policy recommendations for inclusion of disadvantaged populations such as youth. With a Bachelor in Political Science and International Affairs, she's also specializing in public policy evaluation. So welcome, Luciana. And last in the list, Brian Griffin from the USA. He's currently a senior fellow at the London Center for Policy Research at the National Field Director of the Maccabi Task Force Foundation. And he's a lawyer, a writer, a specialist in American foreign policy in the Middle East, and holds a Juris Doctorate, Master of Management, and Bachelor in Classical History and Political Science. So maybe in that order that I read out your names, you can take 2 or 3 minutes to comment of what you heard, and also from the experiences of your 3 countries, which are actually very different, but I guess with a similar perspective. So go ahead, Wilbert, then Luciana, and then Brian. Wilbert?
Hello, everyone.
It's your time. 3 minutes maximum.
Okay. Yeah, as I always told with young people, with my colleagues in Finistère and wherever I am, I always told them democracy is a way to let the world know you exist. Democracy is a way to make your voice hear. Democracy is something like that. You must fight for democracy. I always do that. I always say that. You must fight for democracy. You must involve, you must participate, because you are the future. In Haiti, we always say that. We said young people is the future of Haiti. Young people is the future generation. But we never give them a space to work, to manage, to involve in political decision in public affair, something like that. My advice for young people is to fight for your future, fight for the future generation, fight for democracy, fight against corruption, fight for that you believe in, because you are, excuse me. Yeah, because you are the future, because you are the new generation. I remember someone says the biggest problem of the poor country are corruption. The biggest problem is corruption. It's easy if you identify the problem. But in Haiti, we identify the problem. The problem is corruption. It's the reason why I want to say that with all people on the world, especially in Haiti, fight against corruption. Fight for democracy is the best way, is the way to make this generation, to make this country best. It's my advice for you. Implicate, participate, involve is the best way. Is the best way to let the people know you exist, to let the people know you are here, and it's the best way to manage your area, to manage your region, to manage your country. Is the best way to make the new generation best. It's my advice for you. I can resume with my advice in 2 words. Fight for democracy, fight against corruption. Thank you.
Thank you, Wilbert, for your message to our participants. And we'll now go to Luciana.
Hello, Daria. It's an honor to join this panel of remarkable young leaders. So I'm going to speak from my personal experience because I believe that it's the most real and powerful thing we can do to get our message across. From a very young age, I tried very hard to be the best student and professional I could, and I quickly reached important decision-making positions in the government. But after a few years, I left because I was not seeing the change I wanted to bring in my community. And 2 years ago, I decided to change what I was doing to get different results. I joined social projects and public policies research, and also engaged in youth networks. And I met young leaders from all over the world that inspire me with their civic and political work. And I finally realized that what I did not have before was a network. I was not connected with others. And that is why I couldn't bring the change I wanted. So decision-making positions are not always the solution if you're alone. In our region, as you may know, our democracies have many challenges. One of the most worrying ones is the lack of education and employment opportunities. In 2020, the International Labour Organization informed that high unemployment, informality, and inactivity rates affect nearly 110 million young people in Latin America and the Caribbean. And new technologies and emerging occupations are changing the labor market and the skills required, and these are complex problems which we cannot face alone. We need to participate and collaborate to find solutions. So the 2 most important learnings I want to share with you is that first, there is no sustainable development without youth inclusion. The education and employment youth gaps are real, and we need to remember that development crisis can quickly become a risk for our democracies. Because when people are tired of trying hard every day to have a better life that never arrives, the political system is questioned. And second, as Lou and Walter said, to bring real change, to transform our reality, we need to engage, to participate, to be exposed. I learned that connection and engagement makes us stronger and help us to bring up new and creative ideas. So my main message for youth is now that we are slowly getting over COVID, let's get together and be contagious, but of passion and new ideas to reach the development that we need, that includes us all. So thank you very much, Daria, for this space.
Thank you so much, Luciana. Luciana is our youth lead from Argentina. And right now we'll go to Brian Griffin, youth lead from the United States of America. Brian, please.
Well, thank you to the Community of Democracies for including me. And I just want to say thank you to all of my colleagues that are doing what they do. I'm impressed by your fight for freedom, and I think it's worth it. In America, I don't think we have a single threat to democracy that might take it out in one heavy-handed swoop, like some of the issues described by my colleagues, but I do see around myself, democracy faces death by 1,000 tiny cuts. And what I mean by that is the attitude towards democracy that's taking hold in American academic institutions and among many people of my generation and younger, is alarming. Once described as a city on a shining hill, an astounding 62% of Americans no longer believe that America deserves that title. The American college campus has become an incredibly hostile place towards America and democracy. Student activists frequently demonstrate against and denounce America and American ideals. And according to a 2018 American International Confidence Poll, over half of 18 to 29-year-olds are unsatisfied with democracy, and over 20% would be okay with replacing the system with a non-democratic system. In the 2019 Victims of Communism's annual report towards socialism, communism, and collectivism, 70% of American millennials say they are likely to vote socialist. Only 57% of American millennials believe the Declaration of Independence better guarantees freedom and equality over Marxist Communist Manifesto. And only 1 in 2 millennials have a favorable view of a free market. 1/5 of all millennials believe society would be better if all private property was abolished. So my friends, my point is this: it is with our generation and those after that we have the biggest challenge. It will take young champions of democracy to reverse this trend, and democracy taken for granted is our greatest threat. My colleague Walter mentioned that sometimes with so many problems facing a modern world or a modern society, authoritarians project themselves as the strongest figure to solve them because they can do everything from the top down. And I just want to, just as Walter did, just as my colleagues have, push back against that. Freedom is stronger. Democracy is stronger. There are alternatives to big government that invades itself in the lives of every citizen, alternatives like individuals, the free market, families, communities, churches, and charities. So I encourage my colleagues to support the idea that we can continue to preserve freedom, and that freedom by democratic institutions is one of the most critical elements of how to spend your time, your activism, and your energy.
Thank you, Brian, for presenting this evidence. Actually, I was going through very recently through different research and findings, and yes, you are right that dissatisfaction with democratic institutions is rising, and that's what we see among our and younger generations. But still, young people believe that liberal democracy and democracy is the best system. So that's quite positive. And thank you very much, everyone, for this panel and the respondents. We actually have one question directed to Walter that we'll go and answer right now. Walter, our colleague from here in Warsaw, from OEC, ODIHR, is asking how to mainstream youth-related policies, strategies at the institutional level.
Thank you, Daria. Let's say that in my opinion, and because of the work that I have done, I believe that the media, at least in the context of my country, it would be a great partner to do it, because it would make the subject more relevant to stakeholders. And let's say that decision makers need to have the sense that something is relevant and timely to address it. So I would first suggest that we have to be very specific. If it's unemployment, if it's mental health, if it's education, let's say be very specific in what policy we want to address, then try to have to promote the sense that it's relevant, giving facts and evidence that would suggest that it's relevant. And then we have to use different channels to make it mainstream. And I would say that having a good media partner to share that sense of urgency that we have for decision makers to do something would be helpful. But we are always open to listen to different ideas to make this possible. But that would be, in my experience, a way of doing it. Thank you, Daria. And Nina for the question, of course.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you to Nina for the question. And we have one more question directed to Lou. Actually, something that Gina already mentioned, and it was about your experience as a woman in politics. You would like to share briefly any of your challenges or actually the opposite opportunities that you were able to face, please?
Yes, of course. Yeah, I always love this question just because I obviously am a huge advocate for women in politics. I think it's very important that we have a significant representation of women that are making decisions not only at the political level, but at every single level that is possible in NGOs, in the private sector, the productive sector, everything. Honestly, I believe I have been lucky. I believe I have been lucky because I've been surrounded with not only people that support me, but women that support me. The political party that I founded was founded by the original group was 10 people, and out of those 10 people, I believe 6 of them were women. And our political party is also directed towards capacitating women for political service and public service as well. So I have been lucky in that respect that I don't think I have been, you know, I don't think there have been many obstacles in the sense of like, there's no one that has, you know, kind of opposed the things that I've wanted to do and the things that I've said as a woman. However, what I have experienced here is just more of a social and cultural level. The machismo that exists here in El Salvador and in Central and Latin America, it's very real. And that is, I believe, one of the biggest obstacles that women face at all levels, whether you're, you know, a single parent looking out for your kids, you don't have the means to, you know, put them in daycare and you have the necessity to work. So what do you do with that? But also I am aware of stories from fellow women in politics that have had really big challenges in you know, especially those that are because I'm not in public service right now, but you know, that's one of the biggest challenges where, you know, obstacles to women are presented is when you're actually serving publicly and people see you as less than what you really are and as a second-class citizen just because you're a woman. And a lot of people still believe that you know, as a woman don't need and do not deserve to be serving the public and serving in politics. So I you know, this is I think it's the same with youth and with what Walter said as well. We need to, you know, take advantage of these spaces. We need to keep fighting for what we deserve as ours. And because we live in, you know, broken democracies, but democracies nonetheless, we have those rights and we have those freedoms and we have, you know, we should be, as citizens of our countries, be heard. And, you know, we need to, if you want, you have that is your right to, you know, to do, if you want to serve in politics, to try to change the things that are important to you. To, you know, you deserve that right to be listened as well. So yeah, I will leave it at that.
Thank you very much, Lou. That is indeed very important to think about gender equality. And that's what we do here at the Community of Democracies. Gender equality is also one of the cross-cutting themes of our strategic plan for 2018-2023 and part also of my portfolio. But I just wanted to maybe ask all of you to provide one last quick message to our audience regarding the topic, or maybe some last piece of advice. Maybe we can start with you, Brian.
Sure, thank you. Well, I think getting involved in efforts like this is one of the most critically important things we can do, and that's why I joined the youth leads at the Community of Democracies. I think thinking about these topics, and I think studying these topics, spending time understanding and listening, and then speaking about them is so important, especially among, and I'll repeat from my comments, our generation and younger, because I think that democracy faces very real physical threats. And I think democracy also faces very ethereal threats, and the way it's discussed and the way that the institutions of democracy might be attacked incrementally. So please stay involved. Please don't think that you don't have, for some reason you aren't the person that should be involved, or that somebody else will take care of it. It's critical that we take this mission upon ourselves and fight for freedom around the world.
Thank you, Brian. Luciana?
Yes, I want to say that development issues also affect democracy. Of course, that civic and political matters a lot, but we also need to bring new solutions to all problems related to education and employment, of course, of youth, which is the most vulnerable group of all of them in our region. So participate somehow and always stay connected with others, because that is the only way to bring real change in our communities. I truly believe that. Thank you.
Thank you, Luciana. Walter?
Well, I believe that we have to use all the tools that we have available to make our participation be meaningful. I would really suggest or recommend everyone to make networks, because that really helps when we have a cause to promote it and to take advantages of the new technologies that we have and the new era that we're living after COVID, because virtuality, it would be a great way, and the social media and social networks to share our causes with people around the world. So take advantage of that, and thank you again to Community of Democracies for the invitation.
Thank you, Walter. Lou?
Yeah, fear is a really funny thing. I found that I've been very, very scared in my entire process and political career. But if you are, you grow out of that eventually. Fear is always there, but your sense of values and your strength and your principles and that notion that democracy is worth fighting for, it really is worth fighting for, especially in countries like mine, and those countries, well, even like Brian's, where the US is critical in the sense of public opinion and how the opinion of democracy remains there. It's people are going to criticize you for if you do things or if you don't do things. So you have to, again, stick to your values, stick to what you believe, stick to what you want to do, and do it. And if it works out, great for you. And if it doesn't, even better. You can say that you actually tried, but you can't sit as a young person with your hands tied without doing a thing. When democracy is at a critical level of what we have seen today in the world.
Thank you, Lou, for this inspiration. And Wilbert, just a few last words, please. Wilbert, can you hear us? Please unmute yourself. We cannot hear you, Wilbert.
Sorry, my last words is we don't give independence. We don't give freedom It's something you have to fight to have. It's the same thing for democracy. I want to renew my message. Young people, get involved. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Denounce corruption. Denounce bad governance. Is the best way, is the unique way to make this world, to make the country best. Is the unique way. My main message is denounce corruption, denounce bad governance, fight against corruption, fight against bad governance. Is the unique way, is the best way to make your country best, to make your country, to make the world best for our future generation, for the new generation, because the earth is the unique way we can live in. We have to fight to make it best. It's my message for young people in Haiti, in my country, is my message for young people all over the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Wilbert, and all the speakers of this session, regional discussion in Americas on democracy and challenges from youth perspectives. And I invite all the speakers from this session just to join us as attendees. And right now we'll proceed to another really exciting session that we'll have right now. It's called Youth Leads Conversation with Rosary Tucci, the director of the United States Agency for International Development Center for Democracy, Human Rights, and Governance. And this conversation will be hosted by our youth lead from Ghana, Samuel Asante. Samuel, I'm spotlighting you, please, over to you.
Thank you very much, Daria. And hello, everyone. And once again, thank you for being here with us. And we'll go straight ahead to start the Fireside Chat with our amazing guest, Rosary Tucci. And she is the DRG Center Director. She has worked in a variety of positions supporting human rights and issues disproportionately affecting excluded populations. Moreover, most recently, she served as a director for Inclusive Societies, Peace, Democracy, Peace Progress, and Reconciliation at the U.S. Institute of Peace within the year 2017 to 2021. And currently she is a and she will also work as a deputy director for the Democracy, Rights and Governance Center at USAID from 2015 to 2017, and a senior advisor to the deputy administrator of USAID in the year 2021 to 2015. She has also worked to advance projects and policies on issues such as enhancing civic space, countering trafficking in persons, rights of LGBTI and persons with disabilities, youth engagement, and atrocity prevention. She also provided strategic guidance on programs in countries such as Colombia, South Sudan, Ukraine, Central African Republic, and Yemen. So clearly, she has a huge portfolio of experience and expertise in this area, and we are so privileged to have you here on this discussion.
Great, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Yes, great. I'm so pleased to be here to chat with you all today, and I'll just make a couple remarks at the top and then look forward to your questions. And I'll frame my remarks. Initially, it's going to be a little bit of I'm going to focus more on the troubling trends, but then I'm going to move quickly to the positive actions that we're taking at USAID, really in support of many of the work that you all are doing. So bear with me on the negative trends. I don't use it to discourage us, but really just so that we are really clear-eyed and understand the challenge before us. So in just looking at a couple of the studies that we throw around at USAID, really again to mobilize and get people as a catalyst to engage in additional youth engagement. We use these statistics and studies to really drive home our points. But some of the studies that we're looking at are definitely paint a somber picture. One study shows that youth satisfaction with democracy is on the decline. And that's relative to how the older generations felt at the same stage in their life. Much of this youth discontent is the perception of economic exclusion and being left out of the decision-making process. It could be as we dive into this, is that because there's a rising expectation of the role that they play, and the impact of the challenges on them. It could be, these are the discussions we have to have, and those rising expectations, in my opinion, are very much legitimate. Other data from the Global Youth Development Index shows that youth participation in politics in particular, and coming from the Democracy, Rights, and Governance Center, that's important to me, that also continues to deteriorate. And in a recent study with some of our USAID partners in 10 countries, only 35% of youth said their community was supportive of their participation in local politics. So they really don't have that support structure or that enabling environment to encourage them to get involved. And finally, an analysis from the Pew Research Center, that's a big public opinion survey in the US, revealed that one of the most worrisome indicators in their survey was young people's record low levels of confidence in US democracy. And I know you all have been talking about that throughout the forum as well. Now, obviously, these reports signal that much more needs to be done to engage youth around the world. Some of the efforts that USAID is doing in collaboration with the community of democracies, such as youthlead.org and the 4-year Global Lead Initiative, I think those are steps in the right direction. But we know that so much more needs to be done. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of our programs. Before I do that, I want to provide a little bit more of a hopeful picture, right? So what are the trends that we see that are hopeful? And I think one of the most important is the informal pathways of participating in civic and political life, and the increase in participation, for example, in social movements and digital campaigns as a way to challenge power imbalances and to champion for one's rights and broader equality. We're seeing a real rise in social movement participation and protests in the past decade alone, increasing from 27% to 44%, of which youth have played a critical role in those collective action efforts. But we know that there's a lot more we can do to support those efforts, and that's some of the ideas that we are tossing around at USAID right now. The last point before I describe some of the programs that we're doing, we know that it's really important that we get youth engaged early on in life to leverage what we call the democratic dividend, right? Their participation in increased civic and political activities throughout their whole life, right? If you get people started early, you'll get that democratic dividend, which we need at this moment when we're seeing such negative trends. And okay, so let me move on to some of our programs, just so we could be positive about the types of actions that respond to these trends, and then really want to hear some creative ideas of what more we can do. But some of let's see, if we look at the civic participation as a spectrum, right? We know that one of the important roles is the role of civic education, the role that plays in sparking interest and generating knowledge about the democratic processes, practices, and principles. So one of the programs that we have in Ukraine in particular is working to increase citizen awareness and engagement of civic actions. So we're working with the Ministry of Education and Science to introduce civic education courses as a mandatory curriculum at various secondary schools. And we've also done an online course in response to COVID. This program also does some really neat activities that aim to meet youth where they're at. So to mainstream extracurricular civic education activities, they've tapped a variety of edutainment products. That's the first time I heard that word, edutainment products, such as various YouTube shows and top-rated TV programs that provide this witty satire takes on politics, government, and civil society news. This program also engages interactive state-building games, accesses large music and cultural festivals, to all in the spirit of promoting inclusion, environmental awareness, civic activism. So you could tell me if those are actually innovative or if you've got ideas to really push the bounds to do much more. We've also supported IFES to conduct 20 democracy summer camps across Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, and Tajikistan. And those camps help to engage young people about the civic engagement process and help them understand all the stages, for example, of the electoral process. And more broadly, to help inspire them to have a belief in their capacity to improve their communities and country. As we move to the civic action space, we've got several examples of supporting youth to enhance their policy advocacy skills. So we've got a program in Sri Lanka, which helps to build the capacity of the next generation of change makers to effectively engage in the democratic process. And so from young people ages 21 to 25, well, we have Sri Lankans working together through small grants to identify citizen concerns and to develop issue-based advocacy campaigns and policy proposals. This is kind of our learn by doing approach, right? So that young people are not just trained, but they're leading actual collective action actors and taking part in the practice of democracy. And the last thing I would say is around youth leadership. Speaking of youth leadership, many of our programs are specifically designed to develop strong leadership skills and capabilities of youth. And so we have a program in Tunisia that sponsors youth leadership councils. And these councils provide hundreds of young people with the skills to engage with their elected leaders and advocate for themselves, create spaces for dialogue amongst each other and across political factions, and serve as a springboard for community action and local advocacy. So I'm going to wrap up there, whether it's edutainment products or democracy summer camps or leadership councils. We're really working hard to help the next generation of civil society leaders, students, activists, journalists, you name them, increase their participation and representation, whether it's in informal spaces or formal spaces. But you tell me, what more can we do, and how do we really turbocharge these efforts to best support you?
Thank you very much, Lucy, for this amazing information you provided to us. And yes, indeed, I do agree on the point that youth satisfaction with democracy is on the decline and is quite alarming, looking at the current issues taking place around the world and the challenges we are facing to get our voice heard on a larger scale. Well, before we move any deeper in the conversation, we have this couple of questions we'd like to ask you based on your career development and any ideas you want to give to any youth out there who want to follow your path as well, or is inspired by your journey and would like to work on the same path. So the first question is, speaking about the beginning of your career, what motivated you to join the United States Agency for International Development? And what sparked your interest in the topics of international affairs, democracy, and human rights? As an aside, I've seen you have an article online on the topic of how to win on women, peace, and security. Yeah, I think everybody should check on that. You can get that free on the internet to win about it. So please, the floor is yours.
Great, yeah, thank you. I mean, I think probably like many of you, earlier on in my higher education, I saw some of the worst human rights abuses happening, particularly in the Balkans it was Kosovo in 1998. There was ethnic cleansing happening, and I just felt appalled by what I was seeing, and really just couldn't understand how that was happening in our world, and how powerless I felt in the U.S. in addressing these challenges. So that's really where I started to dive into human rights and really try and understand how we protect the dignity of the individual. And then that led to a broader career in understanding the full benefits of democracy, right? Their ability to bring prosperity, security, opportunity, freedom, and what I would note is sustainable prosperity, security, opportunity, and freedom. So long decades and decades of sustainable achievements, as opposed to what I mean by like other forms of government. It's not long lasting, right? Eventually people feel that something is missing, their civil and political rights, and their dignity is not respected, their full contributions are not brought to bear. And so eventually people do find discontent with other forms of government. So I just continued to take advantage of every opportunity I had to study abroad, whether it was in Bulgaria to understand, transition to democracy, whether it was in India to understand, the marginalization of Dalits. Just really tried to look for all opportunities I could to learn and kind of find my way into government, where I believe let me just back up. There's two ways you can create change: inside the system or outside the system. And for me, both are equally valuable. It depends on where you feel your skill set is best used. And I felt that I could do the most change within government and try to elevate human rights and democracy in relation to other U.S. government priorities, and really say that this is one of our top priorities. So let me stop there, but I could share more as we go for sure.
Very well. And if anyone is interested to know more about her, you could also check her out on LinkedIn, or you can also read more about her on the websites around. I think the website I found the article on is on Small Wars Journal. You can get the article she wrote on the topic I mentioned. All right. So to the second question in here, the question here is, what is your advice or practical tips as a senior professional and leader of the USA Center for Democracy, Human Rights and Governance to youth who are eager to enter the field of international affairs and development? Additionally, what were the challenges that you faced personally on your career path in this area? Bear in mind that you're also a woman in a high level position as well.
Yeah, absolutely. There was one other point that I wanted to make in the first question, and that actually definitely relates to this question. What is some practical advice? I also have done work in the U.S. as it relates to human rights and democracy building. In the New York State Senate, I worked for a few years, and I did work on some elections in the U.S. And more recently, I'm working on some safeguards to the rule of law within the U.S. And I raise that because it's really important that we understand our own shortcomings and be honest about our own shortcomings in order to be able to work with others, right? And to be able to have a meeting of the minds and understand mutual objectives and work through those together. And that leads to, an answer on your second question, which is about being authentic, right? Being honest, high integrity, and being authentic in your work, and being okay with your shortcomings and honest about your strengths and your weaknesses, right? I think too often we try and put our shortcomings aside, but it's okay. Keep working on those, and be as authentic as possible. And that includes personally and then professionally. That's what I was saying, why it's really important to talk about our own shortcomings in the US as it relates to democracy, human rights, and governance. And that leads, speaking of shortcomings, this was one of the tips I wanted to provide is rejection is okay. You learn from rejection, keep moving on. But there are important lessons in failure. I really like that expression that the more shots you take, the more you'll make, right? Just keep putting yourself out there. Don't be held back by the barriers. See them as a challenge to keep moving forward. The second piece of advice is I wouldn't obsess too much about one specific path. You have to see where opportunities take you, and as you put multiple feelers out there, be open and flexible to the ones that come through, so really keep your options open and be willing to try different roads as they might offer some really interesting growth opportunities and enjoyment that you might not have originally perceived. In terms of being a woman, it's for me, it was subtle. I actually grew up with 4 brothers, older brothers. So I just, charged ahead in the world and didn't think too much about it. I mean, I did experience some subtle barriers along the way. And, you have to, it's important to recognize them, but not be held back by them. right? So to be aware, but to navigate them, to be able to call them out in a diplomatic and respectful way, as you can, and to, garner allies and champions that can help you along the way. I've really had a series of both men and women who have championed the road ahead of me, and just couldn't be where I am without those mentors and that guidance. And so really looking to all of the support structure around you, to lift you up and help you navigate those spaces. We could continue to talk more, but let me leave it there for now.
Thank you very much, Rosary. And I believe from here, we can just say that we really appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation with us and giving us the tips to grow up in our career path of choice. Now, to just give a quick wrap up for this session, let's just remember that in the words of Lou, democracy is worth fighting for, and that is a fact. Yeah, and today from the discussion we've had with Rosary, we've realized that although youth satisfaction in democracy is on the decline, we can still build upon our passion and push forward to make use of the opportunities we get in life to challenge the society, the social norms, and that's what we are facing right now to make the change that is necessary and needed. So thank you everyone for joining us for this conversation. And I bet we can continue the discussion offline and just, keep the conversation going, feel more motivated to make the change that we need to make the changes. And here I leave the floor over to Daria.
Well, thank you so much, Mrs. Tucci. Thank you, Samuel, for this wonderful session. And I just heard so many practical tips that I will use in my professional life as well. And especially we're glad today, as Secretary General in his opening remarks announced that the CoD Youth Leads and the Community of Democracies today became officially part of the Youth Lead platform of the USAID that is designed for young change makers making a positive impact in their community through service, activism, advocacy, education, and entrepreneurship. And we'll look forward to our partnership with the USAID and the team in that regard. And thank you to everyone who joined us today. And tomorrow we will meet again at 9 a.m. Central European Time to discuss youth contribution to the implementation of Sustainable Development Goals. Then we will proceed with a Youth Leads conversation with Ambassador Simona Miculescu, permanent delegate of Romania to UNESCO. And after that, we will have a regional discussion again. This time it will take us to Europe to discuss youth activism. The Permanent Secretariat really looks forward to seeing you tomorrow, and have a nice afternoon, day, or evening. Thank you.